The Red Sea is one of the most dangerous waters on the planet. For decades, it has been a hunting ground for pirates, smugglers, and militants. But here's the shocking truth: in recent years, over 30 armed skiffs have attacked a single U.S. Navy supply ship in one night. 30 against 1, a logistical vessel, loaded with fuel and ammunition, suddenly transformed into a floating target. Why does this matter? Because these supply ships are the lifeblood of American naval power. Without them, aircraft carriers cannot fly, destroyers cannot patrol, and entire fleets grind to a halt. And yet, they are often the most vulnerable ships in the ocean. This story is not just about one tense night. It's about a new form of naval warfare, where swarms of small, fast boats, backed by encrypted radios and modern tactics, can threaten the mightiest navy in the world. It's about how asymmetric warfare is rewriting the rules at sea, and why the U.S. Navy is rethinking its doctrine. Today, we'll break down exactly what happened on that dark night, how the destroyer USS Mason turned the tide, and why this battle has become a case study at the Pentagon. We'll also explore what this means for the future of naval combat, not just for America, but for every nation that relies on the sea. Stay with me until the end, because every detail of this battle reveals lessons that could decide the wars of tomorrow. And before we dive in, tell me in the comments, do you believe small boats and drones can really challenge the world's most advanced warships? The Red Sea has always been more than just a stretch of water. It is a lifeline, connecting the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal, carrying millions of barrels of oil and goods worth billions of dollars every single day. But at the same time, it has become one of the most volatile maritime corridors on Earth. When I think of the Red Sea, I don't just imagine trade routes. I imagine a chessboard where every move is being watched by pirates, militants, and rival powers waiting for the right opportunity to strike. For decades, this narrow body of water has carried a dark reputation. Somali pirates in the early 2000s hijacked tankers with nothing more than Alaska 47s and skiffs, ransoming crews for millions. Then came the Houthi rebels from Yemen, armed with missiles and drones, openly targeting Saudi and even American assets. Add to that the constant undercurrent of Iranian influence, and you realize the Red Sea isn't just dangerous, it is unpredictable. A place where local conflicts collide with global geopolitics. What makes it so explosive is geography itself. On one side, the unstable coastlines of Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia. On the other, some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. You can't simply avoid it. Every navy, every shipping company, every oil tanker must pass through. And that creates opportunity for anyone willing to exploit chaos. From my perspective, this is what makes the Red Sea unique compared to other flashpoints like the Strait of Hormuz or the South China Sea. It's not only about choke points or great power rivalry, it's about the sheer vulnerability of the ships that pass through, civilian or military. When a fleet sails here, it's like walking through a crowded alley at night. You might have bodyguards, but you're still exposed, and history has already given us warnings. I still remember studying the attack on USS Cole back in October of 2000. A small boat packed with explosives rammed into the side of the destroyer while it was docked in Aden. 17 sailors were killed. That incident shocked the U.S. Navy, because it proved that even the most powerful warship could be brought to its knees by something as simple as a fishing boat with explosives. Fast forward to today, and the lessons of that attack still echo across the Red Sea. This is why, when a lone U.S. Navy supply ship found itself isolated in these waters, alarms went off, not just on its radar, but in the minds of everyone aboard. Because in the Red Sea, danger doesn't announce itself with aircraft carriers or submarines. It comes quietly, at night, often in swarms, and often when you least expect it. And that brings us to the next piece of the story, the U.S. Navy supply ship. The quiet workhorse of the fleet, suddenly forced to defend itself in one of the most hostile waters in the world. If aircraft carriers are the proud symbols of American naval power, Then the USNS supply ships are the quiet giants that make that power possible. They don't carry fighter jets or cruise missiles. Instead, they carry the lifeblood of any fleet: fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and food. Without them, no carrier strike group could stay at sea for long. I sometimes think of them as the beating heart behind the muscles. You may not see them in the news, but every mission, every patrol, every operation depends on their steady presence. Yet here's the paradox. These ships are massive, sometimes stretching hundreds of meters. And they carry cargo that can explode with a single strike. But they are not designed to fight. Their weapons are minimal, their armor is thin, and their crews are often a mix of sailors and civilian mariners. It's almost unfair to imagine them standing alone against swarms of speedboats bristling with guns. I'll be honest, when I first read about the role of these vessels, it struck me how much they resemble tankers or freighters, more than warships, and that's what makes them so tempting as targets to hostile forces. Disabling a supply ship can be as effective as sinking a destroyer. Because if you starve the fleet of fuel and ammunition, you starve its ability to fight. Think back to World War II. The Battle of the Atlantic wasn't really about battleships clashing in the open ocean. It was about German U-boats hunting down Allied convoys, cutting off supplies, and forcing Britain to its knees. The lesson then is the same lesson now: logistics wins wars. And if the enemy can disrupt your logistics, your frontline power collapses. That is exactly the kind of nightmare the US Navy faces when a USNS ship sails without close escort. Yes, there are destroyers and cruisers assigned to protect them. But in storms, at night, or in moments of separation, a supply ship can suddenly become very, very alone. And in hostile waters like the Red Sea, being alone is the last thing you want. This is why the story we are about to dive into matters so much. Because on that night, when a US Navy supply ship found itself cut off and surrounded, the world saw exactly how fragile these giants could be, and why even a logistical vessel has to be ready to fight for its life. Now, let's move deeper into the heart of the battle itself, where small boats turned into a swarm, and the concept of hybrid naval warfare took shape before our very eyes. When we picture naval warfare, most of us imagine enormous ships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, facing off with heavy guns and missiles. But the reality of modern conflict is often far less glamorous and far more dangerous. Sometimes, the most terrifying enemy doesn't weigh thousands of tons. It weighs only a few hundred pounds, powered by an outboard engine, racing across the water at 50 knots. These small, fast attack craft may look like ordinary fishing boats or speedboats at first glance. But once they are armed, mounted with heavy machine guns, rocket launchers, or even explosives, they transform into deadly weapons. Their advantage is simple: speed, surprise, and numbers. One boat on its own might not be a problem, but 30, coming from multiple angles, under the cover of darkness? That is a nightmare scenario for any crew. This is not new, we've seen it before. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has long used swarm tactics in the Persian Gulf, surrounding oil tankers and threatening U.S. patrols. More recently, the Houthi rebels in Yemen have taken it further, deploying explosive-laden drones and unmanned boats to attack Saudi and even American vessels. And of course, in the Black Sea, Ukrainian forces have used naval drones, essentially high-tech, remote-controlled speedboats, to strike Russian warships at their own ports. What strikes me most is how cost-effective this tactic is. A destroyer like the USS Mason costs billions of dollars to build and millions per week to operate. A swarm of small boats? Maybe a few $1,000s each. And yet, with the right coordination, they can pin down or even overwhelm a warship that towers over them. That's the definition of asymmetric warfare, using cheap, unconventional tools to challenge a far stronger enemy. I can't help but feel a chill when I think about how fragile this makes the seas. Because no matter how advanced a radar system is, no matter how strong a fleet is, it only takes one missed detection, one boat slipping through, for catastrophe to happen. And if you're sitting on a supply ship full of jet fuel and ammunition, you know that every approaching wake in the water could be the last thing you see. This is the backdrop of the battle we are about to revisit. A U.S. Navy supply ship, cut off in the Red Sea, suddenly finds itself staring down more than 30 incoming boats, each one a potential suicide vessel. And in those moments, the crew discovered what hybrid naval warfare truly means. Next, we'll step right into that night, when radar screens lit up, alarms blared, and sailors had to decide whether to wait for permission or open fire to save their ship. It was 2 in the morning when the calm of the Red Sea shattered. On the radar screen of the U.S. Navy supply ship, more than 30 small contacts appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared again, fast, determined, and closing in. At first, the crew hoped it was just noise, maybe weather interference, but the pattern was too precise. They knew what it meant. A swarm was coming. Imagine being on that deck. You are not on a warship bristling with missiles, but on a logistical vessel filled with jet fuel and ammunition. You signed on to move supplies, not to fight pirates or militants. Yet here you are, alarms blaring, heavy machine guns swung into position, hatches sealed, damage control teams bracing for explosions. I often wonder what those sailors felt in that moment. Fear? Definitely, but also determination, because if the ship went down, it wouldn't just be their lives at stake. It would cripple the entire fleet they were supporting. The rules of engagement demanded restraint. No one wanted to fire the first shot and risk turning a tense standoff into an international incident. And so the crew waited. They watched the distance markers drop, 1,200 yards, 900, 600. Each second stretched into an eternity. Then one boat broke formation, charging straight for the ship's midsection. At 400 yards, there was no doubt. This was not intimidation, it was an attack. The encrypted order came from Naval Command, hostile intent confirmed, permission to engage. The first gunner squeezed the trigger, and the night exploded with tracers. Streams of orange fire ripped across the waves. One boat splintered, another erupted in flames, but more kept coming. The ship shook with the roar of the phalanx CIWS, its Gatling barrels spitting thousands of rounds per minute, shredding a skiff into fragments in seconds. Still, the swarm adapted. Some boats veered wide, some pressed closer, a few even slammed against the hull with ladders and grappling hooks. Suddenly, it wasn't just a firefight, it was boarding combat. Sailors who had been fueling lines hours earlier now fought in smoke-filled corridors. Some with rifles, others with fire axes and makeshift weapons. One intruder was gunned down at 10 feet. Another hurled a smoke grenade into a compartment, forcing sailors to fight half-blind. It was chaos, and yet somehow, the crew held the line. For me, this part of the story is the most human. It reminds us that war is not only about technology. It's about people, ordinary sailors thrust into extraordinary circumstances, finding courage when the situation seems hopeless. And against all odds, they endured, but they weren't alone for long. Out of the darkness, help was racing toward them, the guided missile destroyer USS Mason. And when it arrived, the entire battle shifted from survival to dominance. When the USS Mason cut across the waves and entered the fight, it felt as if a guardian angel had arrived. For the exhausted crew of the supply ship, the sight of Mason's radar signature was more than just reinforcements, it was hope.
It's Mason.
And in naval warfare, hope backed by overwhelming firepower can change everything. The Mason is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, one of the most versatile and powerful warships ever built. Its Aegis combat system links radar, missiles, and guns into a single brain that can track hundreds of targets at once. In simple terms, Mason doesn't just fight, it orchestrates the battlefield. On that night, it unleashed 5-inch guns to light up the sea, fired surface-to-air missiles to eliminate threats, and even launched small drones to give commanders a bird's-eye view of every incoming craft. Suddenly, the swarm that had cornered the supply ship found itself outmatched, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. But here's the part that struck me most. The Mason didn't win with brute force alone. It won with coordination, the destroyer's sensors linked with the supply ship's weapons, creating a crossfire that trapped enemy boats no matter which angle they tried. To me, that moment highlighted a lesson every modern navy is learning. The future of naval defense is not about the size of one ship, but the network between many. Information, speed, and integration can matter just as much as firepower. I've always admired the Arleigh Burke class for its endurance and versatility. But watching Mason in this story made me see it in a new light. It wasn't just a ship. It was a shield, not only for the vulnerable USNS but for the entire principle of naval logistics. It proved that with the right systems and the right crew, even a chaotic swarm attack could be broken apart. Still, the bigger lesson goes beyond one ship. The Mason showed us how the U.S. Navy must adapt to an era of hybrid warfare, where threats are cheap, fast, and unpredictable. Destroyers like Mason will play an essential role, but so will new technologies, unmanned drones, electronic warfare, and automated defense systems that can respond in seconds when humans hesitate. As I think about this, I can't help but feel a mix of pride and unease. Pride that ships like Mason can rise to the challenge. Unease because I know the attackers will evolve, too. And that brings us to the final question. What does this battle mean for the future of naval warfare? Not just for the United States, but for every nation that relies on the sea? What happened that night in the Red Sea was not just a skirmish between a supply ship and a swarm of boats. It was a glimpse into the future of naval warfare. For the first time in decades, the U.S. Navy found itself challenged not by a rival fleet of destroyers or submarines, but by small, fast, and disposable craft, cheap to build, easy to launch, and deadly when used in numbers. And that is what makes this story so important. Think about it. If a billion-dollar warship can be threatened by boats that cost less than a family car, what does that mean for every navy in the world? It means the balance of power at sea is shifting. No longer is dominance measured only by how many carriers or cruisers a country can build. Now, it also depends on how well they can defend against swarms, drones, and asymmetric tactics designed to exploit their vulnerabilities. We are already seeing this everywhere. In the Black Sea, unmanned surface drones have struck Russian warships with shocking precision. In the Persian Gulf, Iranian forces have mastered harassment tactics that keep U.S. patrols constantly on edge. In the South China Sea, swarms of militia boats are used to intimidate rivals without firing a single shot. The message is clear: hybrid naval warfare is no longer theory, it is reality. For me, the most powerful lesson is not just about technology. It is about mindset. No ship, whether it is a supply vessel or a destroyer, can ever assume safety in contested waters. Every sailor must be trained to fight, every vessel equipped to defend, and every fleet ready to adapt faster than the threats they face. In modern conflict, survival belongs to those who combine courage with innovation. And this goes beyond the U.S. Navy. NATO, Japan, India, Australia, any nation that relies on shipping lanes for trade, faces the same challenge. The oceans may look calm on the surface, but beneath that calm is a new kind of battlefield, where the line between logistics and combat has vanished. So the next time we think about naval power, let's remember that it's not only about size or firepower. It's about speed, adaptability, and the ability to work together under pressure. That's the real shield in the 21st century. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe swarms of small boats and drones will shape the future of naval warfare? Or will advanced technology always keep the balance in favor of superpowers? Share your opinion in the comments below. And if you found this story as eye-opening as I did, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into military history and strategy, and share it with friends who love these discussions. Because the wars of tomorrow are already being written today, out there on the open sea.